Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BLITZKRIEG, our own strategic affairs show. There's been a book which is under a lot of discussion now in the Indian Armed Forces, written by a certain Colonel David Smith of the United States Army. And he makes some startling points. Now, I've seen mentions of this book, mentions of excerpts in WhatsApp groups, and otherwise also the book itself. And he says that the Indian Army doctrine is pretty much outdated. The Indian Army doctrine and methodology of operation is very Second World War-ish, if I may put it like that. He talks about Defence Services Staff College, a premier institute, a tri-services institute, which is based out of Wellington in Ooty, Tamil Nadu. To address all these issues raised by Colonel David Smith in his book, I have Lieutenant General Sayyidatta Hasnain here. And interestingly, General Hasnain says that, he has had 5 tenures in Defence Services Staff College, Wellington. Very interestingly, 5 tenures. And he'll tell you why he has had 5 tenures in DSSC. Sir, Jai Hind and a very, very warm welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. My first question to you is, sir, 5 tenures, you must explain, sir. This is mind-blowing. And secondly, sir, do you think it is time that the Indian Army starts thinking about a new warfare doctrine? Much has been spoken about cold start, but then we are witnessing what we are witnessing around us, even what China, and you said the same thing on a previous program, Sir BLITZKRIEG, that what we are seeing in East Ladakh is actually a very sophisticated form of hybrid warfare. Do you think there needs to be a shift in our thinking and the way we approach operations and warfare as such?
Thank you, Gaurav. Firstly, Jai Hind to all our viewers. And as for the first part of the question as to my 5 tenures at Staff College, Wellington, let me say that 3 of these tenures were with my parents. The first time as a child, when my father was doing the course, and second, when I was a student at the Staff College Children's School, at the time when the Field Marshal was the Commandant and my father was a DS. And the third time when he was the CI Army and I happened to be coming in and out from a boarding school. The 4th time I went back myself to do the Staff College. And the 5th time was when I got posted as a DS or an instructor at the Staff College. So one has imbibed the culture of that place and seen that place develop over a period of almost half a century. As to your other specific question about doctrine and the manner in which the Indian Army conducts its operations, you see, there's no doubt about it that things have changed. The methodology of warfighting has changed. Technology has changed. Methods of intelligence have changed. It's a world of information today. But the Indian Army, on paper, seems to be rooted to a very, very conventional kind of warfare. Plains, desert, mountains, one enemy pitted against another enemy, and that kind of a thing. But this is all on paper. This is all in the pamphlets. This is what is generally taught as basics in the schools of instruction. But let me do a little correction in perception here. The Indian Army is not so outdated. It does move at times. Only thing is it does not put things down on paper. There are lots of classified papers which go out. There are lots of classified pamphlets which go out from time to time. In the Staff College itself, Colonel Smith would probably have never been exposed. He was himself, of course, not there, but the officers who he spoke to were probably never exposed to the classified series. And the classified series is where the new thoughts all are taught. They are the ones which are reviewed and considered. What Staff College is all about, and as all schools of instruction in the Indian Army are, is about basics. You try and start with the weakest link in the course or in the syndicate, take him along, teach him the basics, and you have certain add-ons like guest lectures or discussions or paper writing and reviews to bring in the newer forms, the more modern forms of warfare.
Absolutely, sir. My next question to you is, and I would like to quote Colonel Smith, where he compares Staff College Quetta, which is the Pakistani institute, sir, in Quetta, and of course, Staff College Wellington, and I quote, he says both institutions are army-centric in their focus and teach an outdated ground doctrine that virtually all Western students thought was more suited to World War II than a modern battlefield. Both are deficient in inculcating an appreciation for the roles of intelligence, combined arms operations, logistics, and aviation support. Now, I think this comment is wrong at so many levels, sir.
You got to take bits and pieces of it and analyze it. He's not wrong when he says that the aspect of jointness between the three services, yes, that's the first place where formally after National Defense Academy, that's the first place you actually come together to start learning together. And that all too, it is limited. It is, as he very correctly says, it is army-centric, and I know Quetta is also very, very army-centric. But as to other aspects, the aspect of intelligence, the aspect of aerial operations, aviation, etc., I think we have moved on. Lots and lots of this has come into the syllabus today. But as I was explaining in my earlier intervention, Staff College is a lot to do with basics of staff work. The second thing which Americans will not understand, the American Staff College is a Command and General Staff College, CGSC. The Staff College in India is essentially a pure staff college where staff work is taught, where operational understanding is part of the job, but the major part of the teaching and learning is staff work. This basic understanding, I think, has not been understood by Colonel Smith.
He brings in the China factor, and again I quote Colonel Smith, sir, he says, reluctance to characterize China as the enemy. This is the observation that he makes. He says, okay, Pakistan is the enemy. Everybody says that. They've been saying it, reiterating time and again. But reluctance to characterize China as the enemy. Do you think this has changed or would have changed, at least in the minds, if not in the DS pamphlet, sir, in the last 8 months? Do you think there has been a change in the mindset, sir?
Very, very relevant. That's a very relevant observation on your part and a relevant question. As far as I can recall my learning days in the Staff College, my teaching days in the Staff College, and subsequently in other institutions of the Indian Army, what perhaps Colonel Smith is not aware is that we have a depiction about our adversaries, about our enemies. We call the Pakistan Army the Narc forces. Just like the Pakistan Army, I think, calls India as Foxland. And China is known as the Chandal forces, the forces of the devil, the forces, that's what it is. So there are pamphlets on this, there is depiction about this which is there very much. And this has been there for years, since 1962, definitely I know. Chandal forces have been there very much. And we have been applying all the principles of the Chinese army, the PLA, their various forces, and applying our own principles and our own principles of war and teaching, etc., on their pattern. That's how we've been doing it. So I'm surprised how this has been missed out by the American officers who have attended the course there. Perhaps, once again, as I said earlier, the foreign officers do not attend the classified series. And much of this is taught in the classified series. And that's perhaps one of the reasons. But coming down lastly to the so-called observation of the Indian reluctance to name China as an enemy or an adversary. Very interesting, over a period of time, whether China is an adversary or an enemy or a competitor, I know there has been a degree of vagueness about it, fuzziness about it, but I think in the last few months there is absolute clarity in the minds of the armed forces that China is an adversary. Politically, it's not important. I think what people have to remember is China as an adversary, you must remember, also does $90 billion of trade with you, where $75 billion of exports to India and $15 billion of imports from India. Now, enemies don't do $90 billion worth of trade between them. So that is one of the reasons why there's a slight reluctance sometimes. And I think the political leadership in India has been reasonably smart to ensure that they play it both ways. They can go whole hog and call China an adversary if required, and continue to play normal as if the relationship can be restored subsequently. Why take the relationship over the hill to call and to put China into the dock only of being an enemy and nothing else. Pakistan is a completely different kettle of fish, the way we look at it.
Coming back to our teaching methodology, sir, in the armed forces, my question is that do you think that the teaching methodology in the Indian armed forces, especially the Indian Army, is straight-jacketed? We all know about DS solutions. So there is a pre-decided DS solution, and this healthy questioning. Do you think it needs to be inculcated right from the academy onwards? Maybe not in the first term, maybe in the second term or the third term, sir. But this healthy questioning, this to and fro between teacher and student, between instructor and student, at all levels in all courses, sir, whether it's the academy, whether it's YOs or any other higher course of instruction, because it is often felt that it is not as much as it should be. Do you think that's one place? And I would request for a slightly detailed answer on this.
There is a thing called progressive military education, which the Indian Army has taken up very seriously. Now, you must remember that there is a lot of difference between training and education. Training is, okay, weapons training, you don't start questioning anything. Weapons training is there as it is. There's an SOP to it. There's a methodology of conduct of weapon training. There's a method by which you pick up a weapon and fire it and clean it or strip it or anything like that. There's not much education involved. Education is in tactics. Education is in aspects of strategy, etc. The ways where you apply knowledge. And when it comes to application of knowledge, there's no doubt about it that there should be much more critique. There should be one model and then a discussion around it with acceptance of diverse views, and views which are completely haywire should of course be discarded, but broad understanding that there are more than 1, 2, 3 ways of doing a thing. I think the Staff College does encourage this. I've been a DS there and I think it encourages us to quite an extent. But they follow a methodology which is there everywhere in the Indian Army, that at the end of the day they do like to give out what is called a DS solution. But the DS solution is not given in the beginning, or the DS solution is not put against the solution which a student is bringing out or a body of students is bringing out. It's only at the end that maybe for the sake of a takeaway, the body of students is told, okay, you've done a very good job, you've reviewed the entire issue. Here is a model which is doable, which can do on ground, which can act on ground. And that is just taken that way. Now, if a person takes it or accepts it as the only way of doing a thing, then there's something wrong with that individual, or perhaps there's something wrong with that instructor in his teaching methodology.
So my next question to you is in 2 parts, sir. Don't you think it will be a better idea that rather than waiting for Staff College, because it's a competitive exam at the end of the day, sir, and not everybody makes it to Staff College. In fact, let me put it in a different manner. It's a highly, highly competitive exam and very few make it to Staff College. Now, and finally, when you have that flexibility of thought, of countering each other's opinion at least, and when I say countering, I mean critiquing, questioning, whether it's your instructor, the DS, the other people there, the students with you, sir. Do you think it should start much earlier? And the second part of the question also is that, sir, because the impression which I get and which many other people get, and so we have not operated with the Navy or with the Air Force, but the impression that we get, and it could be totally wrong, sir, but I would like your views on it, is that the Navy and the Air Force have, if not cracked it, are at least on the right path. They are much more operationally flexible, if I may put it that way, sir. What is the truth behind these statements and this thought process?
Let's look at it this way. The Navy and the Air Force, no doubt, I find them very, very professional. I've had many of their officers in my syndicates as a student, as an instructor there. Seniority levels are generally the same. I think the Navy may be a bit junior comparatively, but when they come to the Staff College. But for the Army, now you got to remember you are serving in diverse terrains all over the country. To come to Staff College and actually have an effective takeaway from there, you need an optimum seniority level, an optimum age level perhaps. And it's for this reason why the good old days, it was laid down as 35 years as your upper age limit. One thing is there which I like to add beyond your question, and that is that my idea is also that the Indian Army officer cadre is very proficient, very, very professional. The one place where they go slightly weak is on their knowledge of history and their knowledge of culture. Now, in today's world, in the hybrid war world today, culture makes a tremendous amount of impact. And at the same time, the knowledge of history makes a tremendous impact on the capability of an officer. I feel the Army should adopt a little more of these two subjects, particularly at the entry level right from the National Defense Academy, maybe other entry points into the system. They must inculcate a little more knowledge of these things. Even as they go along courses of instruction, it's good to add the aspects of culture, the aspects of geography, military geography, particularly, for example, like Jammu and Kashmir or the whole of Northeast or places in the northern borders. You need to know all this backwards, absolutely. You shouldn't be going to that area and then to start your education in that area. It should become naturally to you. So this is my recommendation and very strong suggestion to the Army.
So my last question to you is, sir, Colonel Smith says that the Indian Army feels that its CI doctrine is perfect. But given what it has achieved in Kashmir and the Northeast, he says that it's nothing very much to boast about. Now, sir, I have served in J&K, sir, and you have served for much, much, much longer. You were the co-commander, sir. And I'd like to ask you, sir, what do you feel about this? Because I often say to people that we are operating on our own soil. The people of Kashmir are our own people. You cannot treat them like collateral damage, and the Indian Army is extremely sensitive. Every soldier carries the COS 10 commandments in his pocket, and they're regularly briefed every day by the Subedar Major or the CO or the company commander, sir, about this. And we are always aware that we are operating inside Indian territory with Indian people. Now, he says that the Indian Army thinks that the CI doctrine is the best of the best. It's perfect, whether it's Northeast or Kashmir, but he doesn't think so. I'd like your comments on this, please, sir.
Firstly, Gaurav, I reinforce what you said,
sure,
that our doctrine is excellent. The doctrine came out on paper in the time when General J.J. Singh was the Army Chief. There's a classified part of the doctrine and there's an unclassified part of the doctrine, and it's available even on the internet. I'd like to remind Colonel Smith that the United States, if you're comparing this with the United States record of fighting insurgency, then I'm sorry the United States doesn't emerge anywhere in any positive light.
Yes, sir.
It's fought all its CI operations as expeditionary operations in Iraq or in Vietnam or in Afghanistan and places like that, where the principles of application are completely different. They are not, as you said yourself, they are not doing anything for their own people there. It took the US Army, for example, 11 years before they came to study of culture of Afghanistan. They never realized that the hybridity of the operations in Afghanistan needed for them to ensure that every single soldier of the US Armed Forces was educated in culture, sensitivities about the faith and religion. Until General Petraeus went there, nothing was taught to the US Army. They came out with the Coin Doctrine after 10 years after the American Army was deployed in Afghanistan. But to compare themselves and with different armies of the world and in negative light put other armies, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. Jammu and Kashmir, I want to remind Colonel Smith, is not insurgency. It's not even terrorism. It is a proxy war. You got a sponsorship of a war taking place on our soil, the sponsorship coming from the other side, from a country which has got an army of 6.5 lakhs, from a country which has got nuclear weapons. So it's a completely different ball game. Don't start comparing Iraq and Afghanistan to Jammu and Kashmir, please. Or the Israeli occupation or the Israeli fight against the Palestinians. These are apples and oranges completely. I wish I could sit with Colonel Smith and debate with him and explain this to him. And I'm always willing to do it, because I don't think the Americans have got it right as far as their perception of the Indian Army doctrine on CI is concerned.
Thank you very much, sir. You shed a lot of light on this. There were a lot of misconceptions which were being propagated on social media, especially in mainstream media, because of this book and because of the articles, the spin-offs from this book. But I'm extremely grateful to you, sir, for agreeing to come on board for this episode, and it was very important to set the record straight. Ladies and gentlemen, with Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, and General Hasnain, he says that, you know, there are confidential things which are discussed which may not be shared with foreign students, so they will not know what exactly is happening in India, plus also the fact that these are essentially schools which touch upon the basics, because the Indian Army feels that the basics must be strong on which you can build a foundation. He discussed a lot of things, but the final takeaway is that you can never compare the American experience with the Indian experience. We are operating on our land amongst our own people, which America is not doing, and we have done pretty well, far better than the Americans. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. I'll see you again next weekend on another episode of Blitzkrieg. Till then, from my team and I, Jai Hind.